All right, well, good morning, everyone. My name is Kate. Welcome to our Sunday class with Guy Finley here at Life of Learning Foundation in Southern Oregon. Hello to our in-person audience and hello to our online audience as well. We have people tuning in from all over on Facebook, YouTube, GoToWebinar, and even Instagram. So hello to our Instagram folks too. All right, so if you're new here, if this is your first time joining us, the format for today is that in just a moment, Guy will come on and give about an hour-long talk, and then we'll take a short break, come back for part 2 of class, which is an open Q&A dialogue time where you can join in and talk to Guy if you wish, and I'll tell you more about that when we get to that point in the broadcast. If you're here in the room, if you have a cell phone, if you could check it, and please make sure that it's off, we'd appreciate it. And for you online, if you have any technical issues while the class is going on, you can reach out to us just in the question box and GoToWebinar or the chat area, Facebook or YouTube. You can also send an email to me at support@guyfinley.org, and I'll be happy to help you. All right, I think we're ready to get started, so I'm going to read the topic and the key lesson for today. The topic for today is the freedom to be fearless starts here. And here's the key lesson. The single greatest unseen cause of premature aging, stress-related health issues, and ultimately of death is the deeply mistaken, agonizing idea that somehow our constant struggle to control the outcome of any moment we fear will one day free us from these moments we fear.
Good morning, and good morning to all of you who are joining us from wherever you are in the world, whatever day or time. As I like to say, you're in a good place where if you want to change your life, you can learn what it is that's keeping you from experiencing the natural changes that are intended to be the foundation of your life and from which you gain new self-understanding. We have this idea that our life is the same as our reactions to everyone and everything around us. So that my experience of life moment to moment is an expression of this relationship that I think I have to my life, when it's not to life that my relationship is with. It's with my reactions to it. And because my reactions are completely out of my control, born of a brew of different conditions meeting different states of consciousness, I'm as many different people as there are conditions that pass through my life on any given day. And then I'm in a constant struggle to try to tie all of that together into some seamless string of pearls by which I can be enriched when I look at myself and think about myself and my accomplishments in life. I know that you don't like to hear this, but I tell you, as long as you're afraid of life, and you've accomplished nothing. Nothing. And that's bitter to us. We don't want to hear things like that. The last line of the key lesson says that somehow our constant struggle to control the outcome of any moment we fear will one day free us from these moments we fear. Are you free of the moments that you fear? Or is it true that in any given moment a fear may appear in you as the result of something that's taken place, and then comes the struggle, doesn't it? Then comes, I have to do this again. One more time, back into the breach I go, because this time I'm going to come out smelling like a rose. I just noticed that both John and Debbie are dressed in red. Speaking of rose, she dressed you this morning, John? Tell the truth, huh? Come on, man. Oh, it was an accident? Okay. I better stay on track here. What I want to share with you today is very simple, really. But you will spend, God willing, a lifetime trying to understand it. And I will tell you that if you spend a lifetime trying to understand what we're going to look at today, this life will not have been in vain. So imagine a reporter backstage, small town, a touring magician. And I don't know what it is about magicians. Maybe it started back in before when people were still traveling in carts. Magicians always have something usually attractive, male or female, and they're always dressed in these strange outfits, and they come out and they do all the stuff that sets the stage for the magician. You know what I'm talking about? So the reporter is backstage, small newspaper, small town, and the magician is on stage, but he has in his act a certain part of it that warms the audience up. I don't know if you've ever been to any television taping of TV series or sitcoms or talk shows. There's always some guy that comes out, God bless his poor soul, who has to come out and warm up an audience, much like you. Talk about flop sweats. So there he is backstage, and he's seeing, and she's got one of those black top hats in her hand, and he can see visibly that her hands are trembling while she's holding the top hat. And he says, "Nervous?" She said, "You wouldn't believe it." "Well, what are you nervous about?" "One of the ways in which I warm up the audience is I have to go out there and I have to pull a rabbit out of this hat." He said, "Well, what are you afraid of that?" She said, "Because I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm not sure whether the rabbit's going to come out or not. It's a trick and it has to be staged. And if I haven't staged it properly, then the thing's going to fall apart. And everyone out there is going to see what a fake I am." So it's a struggle every single time. Now, in case you haven't made the connection yet, how many of you are always trying to pull a rabbit out of the hat? Sweet God, what a nightmare. What a nightmare to think that it is my responsibility to endlessly prove that I am what I am and that I've done what I've done and continue doing it, even though every time the condition shows up where I'm asked to do it again, I shake inwardly and I am afraid, and then I struggle one more time to go through that kind of moment. Yes or no? Out loud, please, so that the throngs of people watching us know that they're not alone out there. They think, "Oh boy, those people, they must be quite advanced. They're in the same room with Guy." It's a strange thing, this idea of advancement that you're so preoccupied with, I might add. I don't know how it came about. I was looking around through some material on the website. I like to often read certain things about physics and quantum theory, things that have a direct application, though we do not understand it yet, to the experience of our life. And I came upon this short article. It was written by some woman, I don't know what it was, but the basis of it was, and I might add that I was attracted to it because I can't tell you, 50 years ago, how old am I, 75? 40 years ago, I had this idea, and now it's just come out in a book. And the book has something to do with the 5 things that people who are about to die regret most, the last things they said. I thought that would be invaluable because if here I am, I'm 30 or 40 years old, and I can read what somebody who's about to die regrets, maybe it would have some kind of impact on this general consciousness, because surely, I don't know about you, I watched my mother and father, and I know they watched theirs go through the same thing. So one of the main regrets of people who are about to die is that they wish that they hadn't struggled with what they did to prove themselves, but rather that they struggled and spent more time trying to be themselves. I think that's pretty telling. I'm about to die and I'm looking back on my life, and God help me, I can't not look back because there's no place forward to look. And I look back on the carnage. The incompleteness of my life. When I spent my whole life trying to complete it. But I spent my whole life trying to complete it according to what the world told me it means to be a complete human being. And the world knows nothing about what it means to be a complete human being. Nothing. And I've said this and I'll say it again, and we've talked about this. Without knowing it, a human being is institutionalized. And the prison is not something outside of you. The prison is these assumptions that we have about what it means to be a free human being, to have my choice and to do what I will when I want. The prison is the illusion, not that those things aren't attainable, but that the person, the self that attains them, will achieve the freedom that they were promised in those pursuits. So the prison is the same thing as Sisyphus, constantly pushing a rock to the top of the hill, only to have it roll back down upon him and then come up with another excuse, another tool, a new way in which I can surpass my own inability to be free. So we're going to look at this in depth if you're willing. And I might add, if you're not, then you might as well turn this off. If you don't want to be honest, there's no place for you here. Same for everybody in the room. The single greatest requirement for a human being to attain what might be called enlightenment, which is a ludicrous word, is honesty. Shocks are moments where you are being asked to be honest, and you talking to yourself about the shock is the way in which you deflect the honesty that has been given you in that moment to see about yourself. Take a nice deep breath. I was thinking as I prepared these ideas that I'm going to run into something that's quite common, much like back in the day when Christ was talking about rebirth. And one of the Nicodemus, I think it was, took him literally. He said, you mean you go back into your mother's womb and come out again? Because that's the level of the mind. It can't understand levels and scale. Can't understand that just as we've been talking about, there are prisons within prisons within prisons, so are there levels of liberation within liberation. And that when we talk about this idea of wasting our life struggling to prove ourselves, instead of using the struggle in the moments to discover where it is that we have mistaken proving ourselves for the principal action of being ourselves, a person starts to understand, well, are you saying I should never know struggles? Because that's what happens. I'm not going to go into it. Years ago, I remember late at night, I got a phone call from a student. Can you come pick me up? I said, have you lost your mind? Well, I'm about to be evicted. Really, evicted? Why? Well, I haven't paid the rent and I have no food. Well, why haven't you paid the rent and why don't you have food? I'm waiting for God. That's what people, when they hear the idea that there is a way in which you can go through this life no longer struggling to do the impossible, but rather using the advent of those struggles to discover in yourself something that never needs to struggle with life the way you do, then we take it as being yes or no, a binary decision. And it's not binary. Nothing in life is binary. The struggle we see in nature, and we do see the struggle in nature. I do every day up on the mountain. I watch it all the time. big dog, my 8-point friend that I feed, he got messed up in a fight. This is the rutting season. And he was he had a lot more humility when I was talking to him. Honest to God, I know it, but maybe because of pain, I'm not sure. But the fact is that in nature, big dog struggles to be the big dog so he can have all the girls. And nature uses the creature to strengthen in that creature that will. But the will isn't big dogs. The will belongs to all of nature that is always and continually reconciling all of its creatures within the context of its environment so that something stronger can be produced. So resistance in this meaning, when they're sitting there and doing that, big dog's getting stronger, and so is the other buck, and so is nature herself learning through the experience of the individual creatures what is required in the next lineage of creatures that will be born out of that struggle. Do you follow me? So that's a natural struggle. You can't escape that. But I know that you don't know this. This isn't a dog-eat-dog world, even though that's all you see is dogs running around, dressed as politicians and religious leaders and gurus, and the people that you respect. What do you think Christ was saying when he said, "Cast not your pearls before swine"? He was saying that we live in a world where we can't see the nature of anyone or anything around us because all we can see is what we want from people and then struggle to get it from them, hoping that that'll free us from our sense of insecurity. Yes? So in nature, that struggle and that resistance is natural. But what about us? What do you resist and struggle with? What do you resist and struggle with? And more importantly, what is strengthened every day when you get up and you struggle to get through another day? What is given greater vitality when it's fear that looks out at a moment and says, "Oh boy, I better struggle, I better get busy and fix this right away"? What is it that's strengthened in us? Is it that which is noble and that which improves all of nature? Or is it that which belongs to a nature that only exists? Why? That only exists because that consciousness has identified with someone or something or some condition. And in the identification with that condition, with that image, everything about that nature depends upon that circumstance and condition remaining in place. And if it doesn't remain in place, then that identity is threatened by anything that comes along and challenges what it believes it must have to continue itself. Because if I can't keep going as I am, or at least improve what I've got, certainly not lose anything, then what have I amounted to? I'm someone who has failed to keep pulling the rabbit out of the hat. And the key here to understand is that this nature that looks at life as a stage where every day, whether I want to or not, I'm called out onto the front of it, and my performance is always the same performance. Maybe I pull it off, maybe I don't. If I pull it off, I'm great until I have to go back on stage again and one more time appear like someone who actually knows how to pull a rabbit out of a hat. And if I actually knew that, I wouldn't be afraid, would I? If I actually knew what freedom was, how could I fear losing it? Do you understand the question? So that unnatural struggle debilitates us. It drags us down into deeper and deeper levels of identification where the conditioning that's produced in that moment that brings the struggle up is strengthened and strengthened and strengthened again. And we wind up losing something that we don't even know we've lost. So let's just slow it down a little bit. Do any of you struggle? Do you know that no moment, take a nice deep breath. Do you know that no moment comes to struggle with you? But my life is filled with moments that just bring up struggle. Yes or no? I mean, first of all, you see and agree? I shouldn't take the time to do this, but I can't. This morning, it was the most beautiful morning in my whole life. No, it was. See, you don't understand that. I know you don't. I'm not talking about Guy's life. I'm talking about in the life of whatever it is that inhabits Guy and that gets to share from time to time circumstances that illuminate whatever this nature is and bring out of it not just the beauty that it sees, but the experience of beauty that is timeless. Patricia and I are driving down our driveway, and we live on a mountain, and it was like driving over a carpet of leaves, a textured carpet of leaves, like they had in the 60s when you used to, smoke a little doobie, and everything was so beautiful. There's a carpet of leaves, and it was hit by light that was coming from the side, and one side of the hill was completely covered in mist, and all of the trees, most of the trees still had their colors, and the leaves on the ground, and the mist, and the light. It was absolutely breathtaking. And in a moment like that, is there a struggle? Or is it a gift? But somebody might be driving down a driveway like that and in an immense struggle. Were you in a struggle this morning? Do you understand? No moment comes to struggle with you. If you could remember that much, then when the moment comes and suddenly it seems like, you might have at least a chance to question the part of that self that looks and says, got to prove myself one more time. So, if it's true, no moment comes to struggle with you, yes or no, then what is it exactly that you struggle with every day? Not the moment. What do you struggle with every day? We're going to make a list. It's not Wednesday night like we usually do for Discovery Wednesday, but we're going to just build a little list together so everybody can get on board. And you'll forgive me out there. If you want to participate quickly, you can do it, but we're not going to take 10 minutes to go over this list. I just want to bring something into the light of our awareness so that we can begin to see with new eyes the truth of a certain thing. Let's bring up the heading of the list if we can. There it is. What are some of the conditions that you find yourself struggling with, if not on a daily basis? Pretty clear question, right? Let me prime the pump as I like to do. How about this? How many of you struggle to maintain your appearance? How about struggling to win the approval of somebody? How about struggling to avoid the disapproval of somebody? In case you don't know what that means, it means I'm thinking about what to do to gain the advantage or to look like I don't care. Do you know that when you try to look like you don't care, that's the proof of how deeply you care? And what you're struggling with in those moments is a certain kind of conflict that isn't visible to you. How about, I struggle to keep, yes or no, everyone in line. Don't get out of line. Because the minute that you aren't what I need you to be, the minute you start doing what I don't want you to do, am I not in a struggle? Yes or no? Yes. So a couple in the room, Ellen?
Feeling insecure.
I struggle all the time with these voices that won't leave me alone. I'm so insecure. And when I struggle, by the way, with any of these things, there is no struggle that you have with any of these conditions that doesn't produce, or I should say, that doesn't come accompanied with the opposite. So if I'm struggling to maintain an appearance, it means I live with the constant fear that somehow or other people won't see me the way I want to be seen. Who else has a thing Chrissy?
When life goes left when I want it to go right.
I struggle with every moment that doesn't confirm who and what I am and believe must happen so that I can continue to be, God help you, Chris.
I
Mike.
struggle with
I struggle with aggression. Now, most of us struggle with aggression. We just don't admit it. What does it mean that we struggle with aggression? What's judgment? Isn't judgment a form of aggression? And isn't judgment produced, whether we see it or not, by some form of fear or misunderstanding of what we're looking at? So the aggressive nature then wants to buttonhole whatever it is that's bothering it in a name it can give it. So you have the judgment and therefore the sense of being one more time in control of this aggression. But that's not the issue. The struggle is not yours to control or change others. The struggle is between a mind that has decided how people should be and then what I react when they're not. So the struggle is a conflict in this mind, Mike. I see how things should be, then it brings up how I shouldn't be or they shouldn't be because I know how they should be. There is this unending struggle in these opposites. On the board, a couple people have chipped in here quickly. I'll just, I struggle upholding my image. Isabella, yes, I'm going to talk about this at great length. Struggle with time. Oh my God, I'm late for a very important date. No time to say hello, goodbye. Oh, I'm late again, and I'm always late. Struggle to answer a moment that makes me feel like I have to complete it. Tony, struggle with trying to prove myself, self-approval, struggling not to lose control. Struggle with confusion about my spirituality. There was one more, Terry, I want to go on.
Sense of inadequacy.
Huh?
Sense of inadequacy.
I struggle with a sense of inadequacy. Now, I'm not struggling with a sense of inadequacy when I'm judging you, am I? So I would like to understand how it is that on one hand I can be so superior to everyone that I know exactly what's wrong with them. On the other hand, 10 minutes later, I'm struggling with a terrifying sense of inadequacy. And by the way, where does judging others come from other than the way in which that consciousness that is always feeling inadequate, it's there, it doesn't just appear, that's how inadequacy hides itself. All right. On we go. Got to keep going. Why do I struggle with these moments? We made a list, quick one, of 20. Why, do you agree that most of us struggle with most of what was just brought up? Why? Why do I struggle with it? Okay, look, see, the problem is you're not actually in your life yet. No, honest to God, that's the truth. What you are is in the life that talks to you about your life. And the life that talks to you about your life isn't your life. It's the same life mom had, dad had, their mother, their father, for generations after generation. The sins of the father visited. What are the sins? He never lived. And because he never lived, he invented a life. And he didn't even invent it. This culture and consciousness invents life. And then I struggle to maintain the life that isn't even mine, believing that if I could just prove that it's mine, it'll prove that I exist as someone separate and individualized. It's not true. So what is it that we struggle with? Let's bring up the key lesson number 2, please. Please let this in. If we struggle with any moment for the fear of keeping some image of ourselves in place, then it is fear that struggles and that has taken our place. If we struggle with any moment for fear of keeping some image of ourselves in place, then it is fear that struggles and that has taken our place. The cuckoo bird lays its eggs in the nest of another bird so that that bird might hatch that cookling. It's a Jewish dish. So that it might hatch it. Something has supplanted our relationship with an order of understanding that knows when and where certain struggles are necessary and when other struggles are useless, because we're going to look at this together. Whose struggle is it if it turns out that this key lesson is true? That's fear that struggles and that's taken our place. Who is it that's struggling for me? Try to bring it down. What's struggling for me is something that comes up all the time, anytime some moment appears where I feel as if something is endangered. I heard you said this about me. You can't say things like, what am I am threatened by rumor. Imagine a human being threatened by the thought that someone doesn't like them. Do you understand the imprisonment of believing that you and yourself, the value of it is determined by what other people think, and in the biggest scale, what this world thinks of you? Because that's what we are, is in an endless struggle to prove that we are as we've imagined ourselves to be, not knowing that it's not even our imagination, and that somehow if we can just keep that all in place, the world, the stage, the audience that we're looking out at any given moment is going to go, oh, look at him. He is something special. Look how consistent he is. And what the world doesn't know is that that man or woman and the consistency that you see in them is at the cost of their very soul. What does it profit a man or a woman to have struggled their whole life to obtain what is taken from them the moment anything changes that they don't like? The struggle for the continuity of, okay, little Miss Muffet sat on her tuffet, believing in her way. Along came a spider, sat down beside her, said, I'm going to make all that go away. Now, what is it that spider represents? Haven't you noticed yet? While it's always seemingly some different moment, it's really the same experience, but it doesn't seem like it's the same experience over and over again. Because each of these conditions touches a certain aspect of an unconscious nature in which is buried some form of identification with an image. Each condition touches a separate I. Now, the separate I's all belong to an unconscious nature. But each of these individual I's come up as triggered by that circumstance. And when that particular I is triggered by that certain circumstance, then it feels itself all of a sudden isolated, individual. Now I must do something, and it continues to do what? It responds to that condition to struggle with it, and it never connects the fact that it has been struggling with a myriad of different conditions, all based on the same consciousness, trying to keep the continuity of itself in place. Isn't that what's going on? You look at the news, you see something about your money, you get a letter from your doctor, something comes in, and in that moment, is there not all of a sudden a certain I, yes or no? This is another whole topic. That I, seems to be following the reaction. That I seems to be the product of the reaction, doesn't it? The I is not the product of the reaction. The reaction is the I. And no I exists outside of that, save for an I that we're working at understanding that's capable of seeing the legion of I's triggered by conditions come up, and then suddenly each I struggling to make sure the money's there, the people are there, the approval's there, my health is there, my appearance, all these different moments all the time struggling the same struggle, in case that's not clear. Is that getting clear to you? And so my life is spent protecting what I've imagined I have to be free. Now, I know that most of us have no idea what I'm talking about. Of course I'm protecting what I have that has set me free. No one is free who fears some moment is going to take from them what they believe they are. No human being is free. We actually, in a prison, back to, I think it was Wednesday night, I don't know when it was I was talking about this. In a prison, the system of prison is what? We said you're thrown in prison, you find someone who's leading a group, you join a group so that you can have security in that prison, so you can have the advantages that that group does. You make war against anybody that threatens your group, your idea, the image of yourself. And in that moment, what am I doing? I've joined this group, this gang for protection. Haven't I? And I'm telling you that when you start struggling to somehow or other ensure the sense of yourself goes on uninterrupted, you have joined a gang inside of a psychological prison that was put together by a consciousness that acquired all of these things that it thought was valuable, that didn't know what else there was. I'm measured by my position, my power, my possessions. I'm measured. And I believe somehow or other that all of that has to be kept in place, because if it's not, surely I'm going to lose something incredibly valuable. I'm going to lose my life. And what we don't understand is that your life is forfeit literally every time you allow the fear that produces the struggle to tell you what to do in order to do what? Keep it alive. If you knew you were breathing life into a fear, would you breathe life into it? There it is, it's laying on the ground. And something says, quick CPR. Revive it. Revive your sense of security. Isn't that what it does? Quick, mouth to mouth. Get its heart going. Because if that dies, you die too. That's why you're so codependent. That's why your relationship seems so vital to you, because each and every one has a certain connection to the sense of I, and it needs to keep going. And not just keep going, but it has to keep going the way Chris wants it to keep going. I'm just throwing your name in out of the blue. Yeah. 10,000 struggles. I was thinking about poor Atlas. Because it feels like that, doesn't it? Here comes a moment and suddenly whatever I was planning on, it's a little sketchy. Government's messing with me, my husband, my wife, my children, the climate, my car, traffic. Something's always messing with me. And when it's messing with me, I feel like I have to, one more time, just hoist this whole thing up and then bear it. That's how far it's fallen. We actually believe that we have to bear living with a fear. Don't you? You don't have to bear living with a fear. But the only way in which it becomes evident to you that that is the case and that some other actual possibility exists is to start to recognize, in some extent or another, a certain question you have to ask yourself, and I'll ask it of you now. Ready? Take a nice deep breath. Do your struggles to save yourself from whatever fear it is that appears in that moment, can your struggle to protect yourself from a fear do anything other than create the relationship you already have with fear? Or is that struggle with what you fear the continuation of that fear? It is, isn't it? I'm not saying it's fun, but I'm saying it's pretty evident to me. Every time I worry about him, her, this, that, up, down, I believe that worry somehow or other is critical to my well-being. And since it's critical to my well-being, I'm going to have to struggle now, figure out how to get through this. And I struggle to get through it to what end? To what end do I struggle to get through it? To try to pull the rabbit out of the hat again. Yes or no? That's why we need new self-knowledge, real self-knowledge. I have to make this differentiation so that we don't get thinking to ourselves, well, he's saying, don't struggle. Honest to God, even though you don't know it, you don't struggle yet. You live the life of something that is struggling in you. Because a moment comes and it acts on what is passive, this conditioned nature, all of these ideas, these images, who I take myself to be. And something shows it, stirs it up. And then when it is stirred, it can't be stirred unless it's passive. So all of the activity that I call as my activity is stemmed out of this passive nature that only knows how to protect itself, and it calls the fear of that moment being active and what it's going to do to protect itself. Fear is never an active response unless it's instinctual fear, and even then it's not. There's a difference between what we're going to call useful struggle and useless struggle. Because there's definitely useful struggle. I'll give you an example. I'm not proud of it, but I'll give it to you. I love the game of golf. Now, I have, as all men and women do, certain handicaps physically, not to mention that I didn't start until late in my life, but I have problems with leg and all that, and so I know what a beautiful swing looks like. I know exactly what it looks like, and I see the result of a beautiful swing, and I think to myself, Guy, you need a beautiful swing. Now, that's not wrong to struggle with my body so that I can learn more improved ways to bring about a singular movement, because part of what makes golf extraordinary is that it requires that mind, body, and heart, moving center, intellectual center, it requires it be in a singular state that no one part can bring about in itself. Give me a little insight why I enjoy golf. Now, that singularity cannot be obtained by the mind that wants to obtain it. And the heart, the love of the game can't obtain that singularity. It is brought about through struggling with that which divides. It is brought about by seeing that it is this intention, this demand, this struggle to make the best shot. The struggle to make the best shot improves not only ensures that the best shot isn't made, but that likely some tension come out of trying to imagine what that shot is going to produce the opposite. You can see that a little bit, right? It doesn't have to be golf. So as I struggle with that, if I do properly, it's useful. Why? Because the useful struggle always involves discovery. Useful struggle always involves exploration. And out of exploration and discovery comes integration. So useful struggle is always involved in the gradual recognition of limitation, the realization of that, and then allowing a greater intelligence to amalgamate into something singular, something that comes out of that effort and that struggle. That's a useful struggle. Do you understand it? A useless struggle, on the other hand, is inseparable from the fact that some part of us meets the same moment in the same way and always struggles one more time. I watch this all the time. I watch people on the golf course hitting the swing, practicing imperfection because they believe if they just get it imperfect enough, they'll perfect it. They'll actually get to the point where they will achieve what can never be achieved, because everything about their struggle is to avoid seeing themselves as they are. Why do you think people don't practice, whatever that might be? Why do you think you don't do your work, speaking of practice? I don't want to meet the limitation. Because I believe I'm unlimited. And anything that shows me that I'm not as I've imagined myself to be, I'll struggle with it a little bit, but as soon as that struggle proves fruitless, I'm out of here. And I'll just do the best with what I've got, but hate myself because I never really struggled, and resent anyone and everything that shows that somehow or other it was possible to get past myself. You must get past yourself. But to get past yourself, you have to know what the self is that you need to get past. And it's not the self that sits and says to itself, oh, what's going to happen? What does this mean? Oh, I better struggle here. What the self you have to get past with is this order of consciousness that believes, and it does, that somehow or other, if I just keep struggling to be fearless, if I just keep struggling to keep the security and my relationships in place, if I just keep struggling one day, I won't have to struggle. And say how old you are to yourself. And that's how many years something has been talking to you and telling you in the appearance of that moment of fear that here is what to do about it. Struggle with it this way or avoid it. And by the way, the avoidance of a fearful moment is also a form of struggle. And what am I struggling? Just to recap that before we go on. If I'm struggling uselessly, I'm struggling to somehow or other transcend not the limitation that I have, but my refusal to recognize it. That's what I'm struggling to do. I'm struggling to recognize that what it is that I believe I am and can do is true, and all of my pain that I can't manifest that proves to me that actually I am as I've imagined myself to be. I know people, I see them on the golf course, they never practice in their whole life, and it's actually kind of funny. So they never hit a good shot. I mean, maybe 1 out of 40 good shots, and the other 39, you know what they do after they're done swinging? Oh, I can't believe that. I can't believe I did that. What's wrong with me? And they take the judgment of themselves as the proof that they're other than the self that just swung the club. You see, that's lunacy. Now, if you can put that together with your own life, that's exactly what happens every moment. Oh no, look at this. What am I going to do? I'll tell you what that oh no is about. It's about the fact that inwardly you brought it to yourself. You actually created the very oh no moment that then you avoid and struggle to avoid, because it wouldn't exist without something in you that was identified with the continuity of a self that only exists in imagination. And the proof that it only exists in imagination, and you have to be able to see this. I can't make you see anything. The proof that it's imagination is that it always comes into question. One more time. Into the valley of 600 rode, into the valley of death rode the 600. God, aren't you tired of looking down that valley and seeing the hordes approaching and then trying to muster the troops and figure out what am I going to do now? And all that's unconscious. And you know, if you could see it underneath, somewhere in some little hot bubbly place, there are all these little imps, and they're all going, yeah, because people will think this, or they're not going to like that. It's all going to go to hell in a handbasket. You're going to hell, man, if you don't struggle. And you're in hell when you're struggling with fear. Yes or no? So, how am I doing? 17 minutes. So one of the issues here, as we summarize this and get into our exercise, one of the issues here is that when a moment comes along and suddenly I'm filled with some kind of dread or negative anticipation, first of all, what am I actually looking at in that moment? Here comes an event, it threatens my health, threatens my security, threatens a relationship. In that moment, when I feel threatened, what am I actually looking at? Remember I said the moment doesn't come along, the moment doesn't bring you a struggle? Well, what am I actually looking at in a moment like that? Anybody? John? My mind has been stirred by an event, whatever its nature, and when that mind is stirred, suddenly it needs to know what has stirred it. Now the root resistance in that moment is the product of a bed of conditioned thoughts and feelings, and out of them will come one that is particular to the circumstance that triggered it. And so out comes I, like some kind of dark daffodil. Out comes that I, and that I struggles with that moment because that moment seems to threaten the freedom it imagined it had until the condition proved it was imagined. Can you follow that? So I am struggling not only with what my mind is telling me the moment means to me, but the me that's struggling with that moment only exists because it is dependent on everything and anything keeping the image of itself in place. And that is how it runs in the darkness of this unconscious nature. And does it question itself? You know, part of the beauty of a real school, I've always said this to you, isn't that you get answers here. You mustn't take answers from this place. You must allow the school to bring up in you questions that have been sitting there dormant. Like, why is it that I'm struggling every bloody day of my life to protect something that I've never been able to protect? Does that mean that I don't struggle to do what is useful? No, it means that I see what is useless, I see what is useful, and I agree to do what is useful, and I refuse to do what is useless. And only when you start to refuse to do what is useless will you discover how useless that I is in that moment, because it can't stop anything. See, it seems when I'm struggling with something that I am different than what I'm struggling with. Yes or no? Doesn't it? You see, and the I that is struggling with this moment it doesn't want, with this situation, it's there because the situation is threatening that I, and it must do everything it can to make sure everything returns, gets back in line, so that I can be me, happy-go-lucky me. But here's the thing, is the I that is struggling with the moment is the moment it's struggling with. The I that struggles to be free of fear doesn't exist without the fear it's struggling with. They are a singularity. They are one nature, divided up into the illusion of a me and the illusion of a condition that's threatening me. They're a singularity. Now, if I actually saw that that was true, and you must one day, what would happen to me in the moment where, and it's almost every day, who's there? A worry. Who's there? A fear. Who's there? A problem. Who's there? Chris. Or Barbara, it doesn't matter. Heidi, Mike, could be anybody. Couldn't it be anybody on any given day? Any situation? Even those you say you love the most? Go away. Why? You're a threat. So I've been pushing away what threatens me for 10,000 years. And then I begin to understand I've never found the freedom that's promised to me if I just struggle one more time. Do you struggle with your own thoughts? Make it personal. Lie in bed. Get up in the morning. Get off the phone. Why would I struggle with my own thoughts? It's actually a form of psychosis. Struggle with my own thoughts. Why do I struggle with my own thoughts? Because they are the remnant of some unfinished piece of business that unless I can get it finished, I'm under threat. And the more I try to finish what is threatening me, the more I strengthen the identification with those thoughts and feelings that produce that fear. And you can see, if you can see it at all, I'm describing an unconscious, conflicted circle inside of this consciousness that breeds itself by trying to escape itself. That breeds itself by trying to escape itself. Yes? We're going to call up the third key lesson in a moment. Eric, Kate. So this endless struggle that we are describing here to protect ourselves from what we fear will happen if we don't struggle can be seen, if I've made any case at all, to be a useless struggle, can't I? What would happen if we didn't try to hold everything together? You know, you people talking about mindfulness, enlightenment, the Tao. I follow the Tao. I love I Ching. I'm a yin yang guy myself. Yeah. I have complete faith in God. And even if I don't think there's a God, I know somehow other things are meant to work out. It's just all these religious, spiritual, and psychological affirmations that sit like some kind of rummage, some kind of trash at the bottom of a bin. And when something comes and stirs that bin, up it comes in order to prove or somehow to protect myself from something that I've never been able to protect myself from, ever. Let's bring up the third key lesson and we'll get to our exercise and close the talk. At some point, well along the upper inner path, there dawns an unthinkable revelation, one that signals the beginning of a new kind of struggle in one's work to awaken to what is real and everlasting. In many ways, this awakening is the last and greatest struggle of all, because it is to finally stop struggling with life once and for all. Imagine you're outside on a sunny day and someone's walking toward you, and a shadow is following them. Would it occur to you to try to protect yourself from that person's shadow? Would it? Or is that ludicrous? You know the shadow has no substance. Yes or no? Yes. Fear is an incessant shadow of an unconscious nature that is always trying to prove itself real. And the only hope that you and I have is to see that that's true. That my fears don't exist apart from what I'm identified with. And I never agreed to be identified with anything. I found myself in a world where this identification was like a pool I was bathed in, and then I learned how to luxuriate and buy myself special cloths to make it look like I was something special while I bathed in it. If I see any of that truth, then something that is unthinkable has to start happening. And that's what your work is, not my work. What would happen if the next time I started worrying about what this person is, or who did that, or why they did this, or what this particular piece of news means, or all of the things that come down the line every time life throws us out on the stage and says, time to pull that rabbit out? What if I understood beyond the shadow of a doubt that I have to engage in a completely new kind of struggle in that moment? And the struggle is to let the shadows walk by. Let them go by. Make the moment useful instead of useless. The struggle to prove or protect myself. As I imagine myself, there is nothing more useless than that, because it is fear's work. But on the other hand, the struggle to discover that there is another kind of struggle, that through which I can begin to gain some insight into this nature, that I can start to see, you know what? People talk about, boy, I don't want to come back to this planet when I don't want to be reborn here, or whatever it is they talk about. Every day of your life, that nature is reborn and reborn and reborn, because you pump life into it every time you resist whatever it is that says it's going to take from you your life. This is a rough road to hoe, as I like to say, road to hoe, because what I think is my usefulness is the extent to which I struggle to keep everything in place. That's how I gauge as a human being. I'm useful because not look at what I've done, but look at what I think people see me as being. Because if your work was actually satisfying in what you've done, you wouldn't be afraid of anything that comes to undo it, because your satisfaction is not in the outcome, it's in the relationship of the moment. That's where your peace is. That's where your power is, in the unity. And where weakness and threat and struggle exists is always in this divided nature that believes it's only as valuable as people agree it is, or whatever the number is in your bank account, or whatever it is that you're able to do or not do on any given day because of your health. So that we're in a constant state of measuring who and what we should be in order to be free the way we've imagined ourselves to be. And when the moment doesn't agree with what we've imagined, then we struggle to do what? Change the moment. Ignore the fact that that moment doesn't exist without what I'm identified with. And that's where everything has to turn, the true repentance, to turn around and start seeing, you know what? The struggle has to be a useful one. And I will no longer struggle with what is useless. God help me. And if you make that aim, God will help you. And the first help you'll get is seeing that you can't stop struggling to save yourself. And then you realize, oh my God, I'm institutionalized. Oh my God, I don't want... Remember that Jug, who was the psychologist, the funny bit? Bob Newhart. Somebody comes and complains about this, that, and the other, and I'm struggling all the time, and he goes, well, stop it. Just stop it. Now, that's funny to us. Why is it funny? Because for the life of me, I can't. Why in the name of God can't I put down a fear? Unless something in me loves it. That's where freedom comes. That's the first and last freedom, is seeing the truth. Because it is in seeing the truth that gradually, instead of accumulating more that you're afraid of losing, you begin to divest yourself of the sense of self that believes it has to go on as it imagines itself to be. So the exercise, useless, useful struggle. Discover, prove. There's a big difference, isn't there? I'm not going to prove anymore. I'm going to discover. And if I do that work, for my work at exploration, I will prove to myself the existence of another order of intelligence. Then I'll know where real freedom lies. It's in that relationship, not in this institution called an unconscious nature that forever creates the world in its own image and then struggles against it. Let's take a break, come back and have our dialogue.
All right, everyone, welcome back to the second part of our class. We're going to get started with an open Q&A dialogue with Guy here in just a moment. I have a couple of announcements before we do that. So first of all, just wanted to let you know about a special we have going on right now. So every November, we look at our products, the shelves, the products on our shelves, and we look to see what do we have a lot of. And we do a big blowout. So this year, our special product that we are offering at a really great price is Guy's hardcover book, The Courage to Be Free. It's such a great little book. It makes a perfect gift for anyone on your Christmas list. It's really something that can be enjoyed by all ages. So would encourage you to look at that and get a copy if you don't have one already for yourself. Get copies for your friends and family. And to make it easy to do that, we've got this great price. You just slash the price on it, and you can see there up on the screen that the more books that you buy, the more you save. And so if you're interested in possibly getting those for anyone in your family or friends, or just for yourself to have, stash them away to give as presents later on, you can go to guyfinley.org/courage. And that will take you to a page that tells you more about the book and shows buttons there where you can get that book for yourself. All right, and then the second announcement I have is that just 1 month from now, I can hardly believe it, we have our holiday banquet weekend here at the foundation. So this is our 4th Weekend of Wisdom this year. And it will be from December 15th to the 17th, and you're all invited to come join us here in Merlin, Oregon. The topic for this year's banquet is going to be in the world, but not of it. And it's just such a great couple of days. We start on a Friday evening with Guy giving a talk and having an open Q&A like we're about to have with him in just a moment. And then afterwards we have some snacks and time to sit and just visit with one another, and Christmas music. And Saturday we have an extended Q&A dialogue with Guy, and then a big holiday banquet feast with turkey and stuffing and mashed potatoes and all the trimmings. And we are even going to do something this year that we haven't done in 4 years, which is we're going to have some music from our choir. So just a little sneak peek at some nice things that we're going to have going on that weekend. And then of course, more time to visit. And then our usual Sunday class will wrap up the weekend. So making an open invitation to all of you here. Also, if you're local and you haven't been to visit back here in a while, this is a great time to come back and take part. You know that it's a lovely time that we have together. So you can go to guyfinley.org/weekend and learn more about it. If you're not able to come here in person, we will be live streaming the classes for free, per the usual, as part of this Letting Go series. And if you're not able to get to the live stream, or if you want to get a copy of the downloads afterwards, the replays, we do have a replay package as well. So you'll learn more about that at guyfinley.org/weekend. All right, let's bring Guy back on. I already have like 5 written questions, Guy. But let's see, is there anything you want to start with before we jump into those?
Well, I thought I would simplify the exercise a little bit, because it's always good to be able to get our hands on something discernible, palpable, if you will. So the exercise is catch yourself pulling a rabbit or trying to pull a rabbit out of the hat. Examples of catching yourself struggling to pull a rabbit out of the hat. How many of you are ever with a group of people and for some reason the table goes quiet? And then what happens? I pull a rabbit out of the hat. I struggle because I'm uncomfortable in the silence. So in order to get rid of the fear of silence, I pull a rabbit out of the hat and say the stupidest possible thing I can. Yeah, do you ever pull a rabbit out like that? How about you're with somebody and they've bothered you or something about them troubles you, and you can't wait to make some kind of sarcastic remark, what you call a witticism. Why do I make sarcastic remarks? I'm pulling a rabbit out of the hat, aren't I? I'm saving myself the discomfort of the judgment I have of you by agreeing to find what is wrong with you and then pointing it out through some form of passive-aggressive comment. Do you see that, yes or no? How about the idea that, this is a good one. Are you ever with people and you want to look like you actually know what they're talking about? And so you add something like some parrot from some strange zoo in Brazil who heard somebody talking about enchiladas, I don't know what, and you pull the rabbit out of the hat by trying to prove to everyone around you that you know what's going on. That's pulling a rabbit out of the hat, isn't it? Why? Because I'm afraid to sit there and actually not know, or actually have humility to recognize I don't understand what's going on, so I can't wait to pull a rabbit out of a hat. Well, just for fun, what would be some other examples that you know from your own work of trying to pull a rabbit out of the hat? Anybody at all? Tony?
Just being wrong, saying something and being incorrect about it.
Saying something...
And being wrong, being incorrect, having the fear of doing that.
I can't quite make out what he's saying. Having the fear of what? Of being wrong?
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody? Terry?
Offering an opinion when you're not.
Yeah, I'm with people. Sweet God, do you know what? Why incidentally do people love to talk about politics and religion at dinners? Why is that? I'll tell you why, because they don't have anything else to talk about. And the more I can talk about politics or religion or whatever the hot topic of the day is, the more this sense of myself who knows the left side and the right side, the good from the bad. And then I can't wait to pull the rabbit out of the hat. If you challenge whatever my particular opinion is on that topic, I will let you know. Will I not? Anybody else in the room? Ellen?
Someone asks you to explain something and you know nothing about it, but you come up with...
You spend the next 30 minutes explaining something that you had no idea. You don't even know what you're talking about. Yeah, that is definitely pulling a... Well, it's protecting my identity, isn't it? Yes, Patricia.
Being in a conversation and turning the attention back on yourself.
Now, being is, I'm with you, but I don't see you. I don't hear you. All I talk to is myself about you, and I'm always pulling that continuity out of a conversation, what we call our relationships. Babs.
Well, it's sort of what Patricia said. Somebody talks about experience they had, and then you have to
Oh yeah, that's a big one. Doesn't it just drive you crazy? You're talking to you want to share something with somebody about you love and of interest to you, and you no more get the words out of your mouth than they've trumped you with something that's bigger and better. What's wrong with people? Don't pull it out of the hat. Don't be better. Okay, anyway, that's the exercise. Catch yourself reaching for the rabbit and pulling it out, and then what do you do instead of pulling it out? Walk off stage. Okay, Katie.
All right, we have quite a lineup for you. I've got 3 people in the queue and 5 written questions. So I'm going to start it off with Tony. She had her hand up during the talk, so I know she wants to talk with you. So here she is. Go ahead, Tony.
Hi, good morning. And I want you to stuff this rabbit back into the hat any way you can, because I hope I'm wrong. In doing this work, which I'm really am grateful for doing, where I don't identify with anything in this world, and I am no thing, and therefore nothing, amount to no thing, and are therefore nothing. These thoughts about God, being a child of God or one with God, actually requires faith of things unseen, but it's needed, I guess, for preservation of our human species. We all need to have some aspect of what we call love to get along, or else we extinct ourselves. But what if we are all there is, and our collective fear is extinction? So why don't we just all enjoy life while here and realize our true potential for self-extinction if we don't all learn to get along? Isn't that a better path we can universally follow?
So I'm sitting at home and I'm watching the news about one more massacre,
Exactly.
one more war, one more act of senseless violence and greed. And I'm rightfully troubled by it. But instead of remaining present to what that moment is bringing up in my consciousness, I pull out of the hat some consoling thought about a day when it won't be like that, when all of mankind will love one another. It'll be kumbaya, my brothers and sisters. When Jesus will descend, when Moses leads us to the promised land again, so that when I console myself from an interior conflict, it is not I who is consoling, and it is not I who is consoled. It is a nature that has created the condition that it resists and then hides from itself that it has created that by consoling itself, by pulling out of the hat one more time that which will allow me to deal with and get through this moment, because tomorrow it'll be different. And there is no different tomorrow for that consciousness. It reincarnates itself with every rabbit it pulls out of the hat. And all of that is just, one day, sweet Tony, you'll see what utter nonsense it is to have hope in things seen. Because it isn't hope in things unseen when I have faith in something that rescues me. It's faith that whoever I am needs to be rescued and must have someone or something outside of myself to produce it. So we're talking about an entirely different scenario here, one that is true self-responsibility, not the avoidance of seeing how I am responsible for the world that I'm forever trying to struggle to control. On we go, Kate.
All right, I'm going to come on to read this question that came in earlier today.
Hold on.
This is from Peter.
Hold on, Kate. You know, before class, Debbie came up and she was talking about, wouldn't it be great if I knew now, back then what I know now? And we had a little conversation before class. We have a short meeting with students and things. Like I know now that love is everywhere. I've studied it. I've read all the books. I know it. I know that we can be different people, that faith will save me. I know it. And where is my peace and my faith and my love? When somebody cuts me off in a conversation, or says something that triggers something buried deep in this unconscious nature, and out it springs. And then when it springs, in order to save myself from seeing myself as I am, I pull the rabbit out of the hat of explaining and justifying why it is that I am the way that I am. And that includes tomorrow I won't be that way again. And there is no tomorrow like that. This consciousness, this rabbit pulling out of the hat nature is tomorrow. It only lives there. And it only lives there because it keeps living the past over and over again and trying to justify how it reacts accordingly. So I wanted to add that, Kate. I'm sorry, please, whatever is next.
All right, we have a question that came in earlier today. Hello, my name is Peter from Ghana, West Africa. I would like Guy to throw light on the scripture in the Bible that says, the kingdom of God suffers violence, and the violent taketh it by force. Thank you.
Well, I don't know if that's the actual King James version of it, but I can shed a little light on that, Peter. And hello to you. Isn't it a miracle? You're somewhere in Africa. I wish I was with you. The kingdom of God suffers violence, and the violence taketh it by force. There is no movement at any level. There's no action that is taken or not taken that in the moment of its inception, which, Peter, only exists because this consciousness is at once that which is active and passive. So something acts and something responds. And most of the action that this consciousness takes is predicated in one way or another of trying to prove, continue, or otherwise gather more of itself so that it can feel secure. As we discussed just an hour ago, the last hour, fear. So that fear is rampant. Now it says the kingdom of God suffers violence, but that doesn't mean that the kingdom of God is violence. It means that there is a constant war going on within the kingdoms that it oversees. And that, again, it's difficult to understand in scale, Peter. We read things like the kingdom of God, and we don't know that there are at least 4 or 5 different words for God, for the Lord, for the idea of kingdom, for the idea of world, for the idea of light. In my Father's kingdom there are many mansions. Is there violence in many of these mansions in our Father's kingdom? So that kingdom suffers the violence, doesn't it? And the violent taketh it by force. Do you really think for a moment that violence can take the kingdom of heaven? Or does violence, because of its wish to escape itself, create a kingdom in its own image and then struggle with its own kingdom and then try to take it again and again and again? Do you understand the meaning of that? And the last thing I would say, Peter, because I've got to go on, and I wish that everybody understood this. Sweet God, let me know from myself the meaning of something. Not the meaning that I heard or read, no matter who it was attributed to. Because then I take that knowledge, that idea, that information, and I incorporate it, or rather it is incorporated by an unconscious nature seeking contentment and confirmation of itself. And then when the moment comes, out of that hat comes that knowledge, and I believe it is my knowledge, and I'll fight for what I believe I know. Doesn't it ever seem strange to you that men and women will fight over what they know about love? How is that possible? The only way it's possible for human beings to fight over the idea of love is if they have no idea of what love is, but they're fully identified with the image of it in themselves, as they have made it in themselves. Let's go on, Kate.
All right, we have 2 hands up and we have 4 written questions. We're going to go to our friend in Texas, Katrina, next. Go ahead, Katrina.
Hello, how's it going?
Huh. Pretty good.
I'm actually in a pretty stoked mood because this talk was just so beautiful and amazing in so many ways. But I find myself definitely, ironically, the majority of my life, I ran literally like for a living as well as for fun. And internally, I've been running, since I can remember.
Yes, Kat.
Gosh, I always get emotional. It's so annoying. I want to ask you, Mr. Finley, to please explain when I feel most prone to run. And you know me, you've known me for a long time. And I know I can't force, right? Like force does not work in anything or any part of life. I've definitely seen that, but have I? Because I'm still questioning, right? Like I'm still today you were talking about, the mind, and I had the thought come up, is it a trickster? And I don't mean that to sound very basic. There's clearly an element of tricking.
Kat.
And I want to become awake to it.
Kat.
Yeah.
Mute her so I don't hear that cracking. It's such a struggle to explain to myself over and over again in different ways. Not just why I haven't changed, but what I have to do so I can then identify with that idea and then hate myself when I fail to live up to it again. You can't run to something, Kat, without running from something. We don't see it in the moment where along comes this spider, along comes this moment, and suddenly a certain part of myself that I wasn't even thinking about it. I wasn't even thinking in that category. That's not the world I was in. And then like that, suddenly I'm transported into a world that is populated by an endless host of associations, each and every one proving to me that somehow or other I have to prove in this moment that I am as I've imagined myself to be, that I have what I have. I got to prove it. And then I struggle. And the struggle's for naught. But I'm terrified if I don't do it. What will happen to me? And the self that asks what will happen to me can't see that what is happening to it right then is the same thing that has happened to it for 1,000,000 years. It can't see it. Why? Because it's busy looking at what it thinks it needs to struggle with, instead of seeing the content of this consciousness involved in the struggle itself to continue itself and prove itself as imagined. You're going to look, Kat, you've always been a scrapper. Fight the right fight. And not only fight the right fight, but there's a whole talk coming up. Fight the right fight, even though everything in you is telling you, you know, I'm going to lose this fight. And then go lose it. But watch yourself accede to yourself. See how you bend to the will of something that threatens you. See it. So the impression becomes indelible. Because it is when those impressions that are indelible, that of myself I can do nothing. Why do you call me good? No one is good. All of the things that you know are true. Then you begin to understand them from yourself. Not because you believe in some hoi polloi God or some precious power someplace, but because you understand the whole thing is unfolding inside of what you have been given as a human being to enter into, participate with, and be perfected by when you no longer try to protect yourself from what you think is bringing you these moments you don't want. On we go, Kate.
All right, I'm going to bring in this question that came in from Juan. Hello, Guy. Thank you very much for your teachings. My mind seems to trick me, making me see the useful as useless and vice versa. I suppose this is the survival mode of the unconsciousness?
Yeah, it's a trip, isn't it? Because I want to sort it out once and for all. Don't you? This is too much to do. I got people, places, powers, possessions. I got responsibility. I got all stuff I got to do. I just want to sort it out. This is useful. This is useless. But there is no such thing as useful and useless for everyone at the same time. What is useless for John might be very useful to Chris. And each moment will change what is useful and useless according to the consciousness that is brought into an awareness of itself in that moment. It'll change it. And so our idea is that somehow or other I can get all this laid out, get it on a piece of paper, put it on a bulletin board someplace, and it's done. And that's what people sell you, by the way. That's exactly what everybody sells you. This is the McDonald's Happy Meal, the McDonald's Kingdom of Heaven Happy Meal. 5 things for only $5 for the rest of your life. No, it's involvement one. Do you remember what one of the 5 things was that person who wrote that book found out? Remember what it was that people say? God, I wish I had struggled with something that was real and struggled to discover the truth of myself instead of proving myself. Now, who can teach you that? Why would I be interested in that? Unless one day I realize, you know what? I'm so tired of trying to prove that everything's together. I can't stand it anymore. So the next time that happens, I'm gonna stand aside and watch this and not let that do that. And then that's your intention, born out of what? A right question. Why have I continued? And then what do you see? Sweet God. I'm not in charge of myself. I'm institutionalized. I'm institutionalized. I actually believe that a fear can protect a fear. And that grows, Juan. That understanding grows. And one of the reasons it grows, Juan, is because all of the energy that's endlessly vested in this idea of protecting yourself from being a victim of what? Your own images. All of that energy, instead of being wasted, squandered, as with the prodigal son, it's no longer squandered. And then something begins to accumulate. It can't be named what it is that accumulates. I don't even know that accumulation is the right word for it. More likely something, the dross is gradually removed. The jewel that is waiting to come out, all of the rough edges come off because I stopped trying to keep it safe. And then suddenly there's another understanding. And the new understanding doesn't end the limitation, it deepens the awareness of it. And that's the grace of God, because only that which is perfect can reveal what is imperfect. And so the light that dwells in the darkness begins to reveal that the darkness is just waiting to be brought into that light so that the whole of heaven and earth can be reconciled. And then that's your life. But not if you have a formula. There's no formula for freedom. End of story. Don't buy any. On we go, Kate.
All right, we have one hand up in the queue, and I want to sneak in one other written question after that before I hand it over to you guys.
Okay.
But here is Mara.
Hi, Guy.
Hi, Mara.
Thank you. That was just wonderful. You speak in such complexity that my mind, that really often understands many things, sometimes gets confused with the way you speak, because you have a brain that works so amazingly. And I'm always in awe at the way you explain things. And it sometimes surpasses my intellectual understanding, which is great, because I've, been on this journey for a while. But the other night I was sitting and I was feeling inadequate. Really inadequate. This is the feeling that was there, and it was bothering me, and I was just going, God, Mara, you feel so inadequate. I got up, started to wash the dishes, and I was still feeling inadequate, but there was a moment when I suddenly said to myself, that inadequacy is just an experience, and it's not me. And then there was a complete separation of the identification with the inadequacy. And it's almost like they came apart, and there was the part of me was suddenly free. And there was a freedom in that moment, because I just laughed. I was like a little girl giggling. And it was just like, oh God, this is a key. The identification is the sin, is the problem. Now, having said that, that was such a revelatory moment. But go to the next day. And the next day I got caught up, so badly identified with something. Yeah. And it's almost like it just came so strongly, and it lasted for over half the day. Yeah. And there was such an intense feeling that it physically affected my body. It was so intense. And all I could say to myself is, Maura, you are absolutely mad. I could feel the madness inside of me, but I couldn't separate myself from it. And all I could do was wait for it to pass. Yeah. Now, when the seeing of the inadequacy not being me and the freedom of that was like a moment of grace. That was a moment that I didn't bring about. It just came. But then the following day, it was so intense, there's nothing I could do to bring about that freedom again.
I got it.
And I just think, I don't know. I just can't, I don't just, stop off the stage. I have to leave the theater. Stop. Oh, it was so crazy.
Yes, stop now. I got it. Everybody here in this room anyway knows exactly what you're talking about. So let's examine it briefly as possible, to be meaningful. Because at the root of her question is, one, this was a magnificent moment in my life, the fruit of maybe years of work, where all of a sudden I recognize that whatever this particular sense of myself is, it's just a shadow passing by. And it wouldn't have any authority if I hadn't identified with it. So the moment I recognized that, some of that identification was withdrawn. Then the resistance to it is withdrawn, because I'm no longer struggling to fight with it or protect myself from it. And then the thing just vanishes. It's like a magic trick. It is a form of divine magic. But there I am, and I'm pretty happy with myself and thinking, this is pretty cool. I've got this lick now. And as sure as shooting, and it'll always happen, the next day something will turn up twice the size of what you just dealt with. It isn't to punish you, it's to strengthen your understanding that there's no end to your ability to do what? This is how we work. Try to see this instead of the rabbit out of the hat. There is something in every moment where you have a reaction, that something is basically saying to you, here's who you are. Here's who you are. You're someone that has to deal with that. You're someone that must handle this person, this situation. That's who you are. And what's talking to you is not who you are. It's some part of you that is afraid of not being someone who can deal with or rise against. So that the minute something tells you who you are, look, something says, oh, look at that. Yes or no? Oh, look at that. Is that simple? And when you go, oh, look at that, is there not an I that corresponds to the thing you don't want to see? So it is telling you, this is I. But it doesn't come out and say, here's who you are. If you walked around with people and every time you were with them, said, this is who you are. How long would you hang out with people like this? Would you? John, you're with, well, she does tell you who you are. You're with somebody, and everywhere you go, you walk into a restaurant, here's who you are. You're indignant because they don't have a table waiting with silk napkins. You're in your car on the street, here's who you are. What's wrong with people? They drive like this. They must seek revenge against all who sinned against you. And here's who you are. Can you see that something is telling you, here's who you are, but it doesn't tell you who you are until it shows you the circumstance that who you are must deal with, yes or no? So that's what you have to see. Something's going, here's who you are, you're inadequate. Here's who you are, you just don't measure up. Here's who you are, you're afraid. And I don't know who I am without something telling me who I am. That's the whole point of this work. So catch that. And when you hear, as you did to some extent, something telling you, here's who you are, you're inadequate, you will at least have a new bit of understanding, a new bit of truth to meet that moment. So you will meet the moment from what you know is true about how it's being created, as opposed to what is telling you has created the moment and what you have to do about it. On we go, Kate.
All right, I'm going to read this question that came in from Jess Spreet, and then I'll turn it over to you and anyone in the room who wishes to speak.
Very well.
I'm in a partnership and I feel my partner is creating his own suffering. I'm trying to do the work, but it's making me feel drained and like I'm losing myself and my light because I feel like I'm so sensitive to his energy. What is the best thing I can do in this situation? Because I can't keep blaming him. I know I'm accountable for my own work, but how do I create that space so I can focus on my resistances instead of worrying about his?
I hope you can follow this. What would you think of someone who was struggling to make a brand new rosebud open up into a beautiful flower with its fragrance? What would you think of somebody struggling to do that? Anybody? Well, you say, well, this person clearly doesn't understand the nature of things. A bud will open in its time. It'll open the petals that it does in its time. And at some point, all of the fragrance that is inherent in that bud will prove to have been there all along, but it'll be in the form of a flower. We're human beings who believe we're supposed to go from bud to flower. Like that. Like that. That's what it means when I say I want to know what to do. As if knowing what to do is going to resolve the nature involved in the conflict. The only way that conflict ends between ourselves and any other human being is when we see the source of the conflict in ourselves. And there is no other way it comes to an end. There is no other way it comes to an end. And you know how you can prove that? Because this world keeps creating ways to bring conflict to an end, and conflict never comes to an end. Your conflict with your partner, your wife, your children, your friends, the guy on the street. It'll come to an end when you see something tell you who you are and that you must do something about why they are the way they are. That's when conflict comes to an end, when I will no longer participate it in myself. And that's a possibility. But you see, that moment can only come about when I stop struggling to figure out what to do with the conflict. Isn't struggling to bring an end to conflict a form of conflict? Please see it. Is it or isn't it? But I don't know what else to do. I don't know who else to be. That's what institutionalized is. All I have is the routine. And I've been inculcated in the routine. I watched my alcoholic brothers and sisters and mothers and fathers and the lineage of my existence. I've seen it. I'm part of the lineage. I don't want to admit it, but I am. And how do I know I am? Because all I know to do is what I've been given to do in that moment by something that has no idea what to do. And if I see that with clarity, I'm going to have to step back, aren't I? Aren't I? That's the new struggle. Not stepping in, so to speak, or you could put it that way. I'm going to step into what happens when I stop struggling and see the nature of it. But I have to take a step back. And I take a step back so that I can see the nature that wants to struggle, that's confused with, that's always trying to change something. And the last thing I'll say about that, just read, is this, because it's not easy what you're just asking me to do. Everything in our life, because of the way this nature is, it comes with a stamp, a coin, if you will, like a stamp. On one side, it says do. On the other side, or die. Everything, do or die. That's all we know, do or die. And because that's all we know, we flip back and forth from doing, then realizing, well, that didn't do anything, so I'm going to have to die to this. But I don't want to, so instead of dying to this, I'll do something else. And you get this circle of self goes round and round and round. But what's the alternative to that coin, do or die? What's the alternative to that? Discover the nature that's its wealth, that coin is its wealth. Discover that nature. And then just read, the last thing I'll say is this. When I see what is true, in the very awareness of that truth, the action is laid out for me. You see the truth of a child. You don't judge a child, do you? Well, we do, don't we? Even 4-year-olds. But even so, you don't judge a child because you understand the child can't account for its own actions to some extent, yes or no? So when something comes up and it wants to judge the child, you know that judgment is out of place because the child can't account for himself. So who are you to judge that child, yes or no? When you see that a human being cannot account for himself because they are as mechanical as you are, then you also know you can't judge that human being. And you understand gradually that what's going to take place will take place in and of its own if you stay true to what you know. It's inescapable. I can't continue to participate in a relationship that punishes me. And I only do so because I am institutionalized to believe that if I just bear this painful relationship long enough, struggle with it, I'll finally change whoever it is that's bothering me. And how have you done with that? So we only let go when what? When do we finally stop struggling? When does an addict finally stop struggling with their addiction? When they see the bottom, when it's useless to them. Me hating myself is uselessness. Me hating you is uselessness. Then when everything's useless, what am I left with?
What's useful? What's useful?
What's useful? But it isn't of myself. He said, what's useful? That's what I'm left with. I'm left with what's useful. Awareness itself is the action. The action is always useful to the nature that's aware of itself. It's not double talk. It's a fact. You have to find out for yourself. Okay, Kate, I guess we'll open it up to speakers in the room for 10 minutes or so, if anybody wants to come up. And if not, oh, I see Marcia. Katie?
You want me to bring her on?
Yeah, we can do that, and then we'll have Mike.
All right. Marcia, I'm going to unmute you. You'll need to unmute on your end too. All right. She's not unmuting, guys. So do you want, Marcia, maybe you can chime in next time or in our next class?
That's what we'll do. Let's go to the stage.
Hello, everybody. I'm Mike. Excuse me. I like getting up here to talk about what I see about myself, what's being brought up, what I see. I like getting up here to do that. And a few things that I've seen, and I've talked about it before, because I'm not going to let this nature hide. I'm not going to let any of these entities, negative entities, hide. And I want to do like Guy was saying, be honest. Be honest, see what you see. And that's jealousy of other people. Why is it jealous of other people? Because Mike, or this nature, wants attention. And if it feels that it's not going to get attention, and then it wants this attention so this nature can glorify itself. That's what I've seen. This nature wants to glorify itself, and it just craves attention. It wants attention, and I see it. I'm not going to let it hide, and I'm going to, once it's exposed, I'll tell you guys about it. So that's what I like to do. Because if you let it hide, it's going to try to get you to express itself. And I'm not going to let that happen. It's not going to happen. These negative entities.
Warrior Mike.
Well, so I mean, that's just what I'm going to do.
Okay.
Okay. Oh, and one other thing I wanted to say.
No, that'll be enough for today.
Okay.
Okay.
Good morning, my name is Eric. It's probably a good thing that our bodies stay in the present moment. Because my body can move on to, it stays in the present moment, it moves on, but my mind stays where my body was and continues to talk about it. So, thought of an illustration, weird segue, is, do you remember the movie Who Framed Roger Rabbit? Where it was live action, but then they also had animation within the movie. Now, imagine that was actually happening here, where we had animation, where I had Eric, our body, my body, but then also cartoon Eric, which, for instance, I know once I get off this stage, right here, right now, my body is going to go, but cartoon Eric is going to stay up here, is still going to be up here, and is going to talk about his performance up here. And now imagine if we could see that, like for everybody, how chaotic the room would be with these, our bodies over here, but Eric's over here, we're all in these different spots because we're still stuck talking to ourselves. I thought that was a fun image, but I'll talk to myself about it.
You'll get a good laugh later. You can't do anything more than be attentive to where you are. Anything less than being attentive to where you are is to live with a cartoon character by your name. If I'm actually attentive to where I am, then I can hear the dialogue between this image of the past or the image of who I might be. I can hear the dialogue. It is what is talking to me. It is the conversation, and it is forever telling me who I am, how I did, where I need to go, and what needs to be done, listen, to bring everything together. And the more I'm engaged in that conversation, the more divided I remain, believing that somehow or other a consciousness that is divided is capable of bringing itself together again. It cannot. Something already exists that is all together, and your task is to begin to die to Roger Rabbit. And on that high note, I'll see you all Wednesday.